All right, wonderful. So this part of the course, which is our graduation ceremony, I call it, we at one level call it our pain clinic, where we're going to teach you how to skillfully be with physical and emotional discomfort. Today, just using the experience of physical, but that ties right into our emotional discomforts as well. I'm going to show you how that works. So you're going to have an opportunity to learn vitally important skill sets in terms of being with what we would call the inevitable experiences of pain in everyone's life. You know, we do our best to prevent and manage ourselves and discipline ourselves to do what we need to do, but inevitably we're living on a planet with just a lot of potential for pain. But that potential is made much more a much more awful experience, because for most folks that pain automatically transitions into suffering. They say the pain is inevitable, but the suffering can be significantly more optional than what we may believe. So when we look at this clinic, I mean, I'm calling it pain because we're going to learn to work effectively with some physical pain today. But I also like to call this one of my ultimate teachings in opening the heart. You say, "Woo, Peter, that seems like a big jump from going from, the pain clinic to opening the heart." Well, it's not as big a jump as you might think. The history teaches us that many groups through the ages have intentionally learned how to be skillful with physical and emotional pain, because it does open the heart. And it opens the heart for a couple of reasons. The big picture goes like this. In order to not let our pain cascade into suffering, we learn how to reduce the resistance that our human nature brings to us when we get into pain. You see, it's really important to understand how we've been engineered by nature. We have so many wonderful gifts, as you know, through brain architecture, body mechanics, and all that. But mainly, they are designed to help us with surviving and reproducing. And that gets in the way of us living a socially useful and personally satisfying life sometimes. How so? Well, let's just take a simple example of a back pain. You have a back pain, and you experience a certain amount of suffering with that. And the suffering comes from the epicenter of the injury, but also from what nature brings us, so we'll stop doing what we are doing. We go to a masseuse and they work on our back, and it feels better. Not totally better, but a lot better. Well, mostly they haven't touched the epicenter. What they've done is they have softened the tissue around the injury, because it has been put into stress, tightens, and puts off signals, nerve signals, to say, ouch, this hurts. You go to your doctor, what to do, doc? How can you help me? Well, here's some muscle relaxants. Why? Well, because the resistance that has come from nature to stop us from doing what we're doing so that our injury can heal, that can be softened with muscle relaxants. But it can also be softened with our mindfulness practice. So when we look at the little formula that I'd like to give you to just give you some bearing on where we're going, the formula goes like this. Suffering equals pain times resistance. So in order to really get a handle on living a life to our fullest potential, both in our physical sense and our emotional sense, and indeed our heartfelt sense or that compassion, we need to understand resistance. Because resistance naturally comes to us through this physical door, and it also comes through the emotional door. And so what would be an example of resistance in the emotional door? Well, let's say you've done everything you can on a situation in your life. You've looked up and down and all over, and you've done everything you can to correct it. But nature brings us worry, continues, even though we've done everything. Why? Because it's doing the same things with the back. It's trying to protect us from not making things worse and to get through this. So how this impacts this opening the heart is because the more that you develop the skills to not resist the emotional and physical, in other words, to drop this resistance, the more you develop that, it has a way of opening the heart. I have a quote in the book, capacity building to open the heart. It seems that as we skillfully notice the qualities of physical pain and emotional pain and allow them to spread and contract, change shape and intensify and weaken, we simultaneously also evolve our innate equanimity, or allowingness we're calling it, that now can manifest as capacity for healing, tolerance, forgiveness, and unconditional connecting with all others. Because although we are growing the skill set to reduce the resistance and therefore reduce the suffering, that simultaneously brings us into being with people when they are difficult in ways where we learn in those moments to bring allowingness or equanimity to our body sensations, to the feelings we're experiencing, and indeed even to our thinking, the two ways we think, image, and talk. So although it gives us an enhanced experience in life when pain comes, because we're not being dragged into the deeper suffering, it also starts to grow a capacity in us to have a greater tolerance, to have a greater level of acceptance of situations that cannot be changed. So it's a very interesting dual path that it creates for us. So no surprise then, when you look at people through the ages who have decided to do this kind of work, we have many seekers from thousands of years where people have done these practices. And so why would they do these practices? Examples are, let's start with the indigenous people who are, before recorded history and well into recorded history, would take themselves into physically demanding situations. Some of you may know that the indigenous person's sweat lodge is really their church or their synagogue or their mosque, if we look at the desert religions to talk about that. And in the sweat lodges, I've been blessed to have been taken into these sacred rituals really by numerous highly evolved people from indigenous communities in the Yukon and Ontario. And when you're in there, you learn how to be equanimous with the searing heat that's coming to your face, the sense of claustrophobia, the sense of suffocation a little bit because it's really, really hot and lots of moisture put in. So why would people do that? Well, as we do that, we learn how to let go of nature's resistance to it. And as nature's resistance is softened into those physical demands, you're developing this capacity where resistance will be dropping in us across the board. So yes, we're talking about a sweat lodge, but we could also equate that to a difficult person. Because when we're a difficult person, we've shared with you, how they're victims of so many things. They're PFP, the primitive predispositions or filters and their primes, we start to be able to open the heart somewhat in those conditions. So you can see the resistance is the rascal. Beyond indigenous people, the Christian mystics of the Middle Ages, they practiced something called spiritual asceticism, putting their bodies into discomfort. And when you don't know what's going on, you may think, well, why would people kneel for hours instead of just sitting? Why would people sit in cross-legged positions, doing meditations and the likes of that? Is this just about being macho or, cool or whatever? No. No, there's much more behind it. Why would people fast? Why would people not, in the old days, eat meat on Fridays? And it goes on and on with different practices. And the reason that people are doing that is they are learning how to not have the nature's resistance in the system. And when we see what starts to manifest there, we see people coming out of that who seem to be more tolerant, more compassionate, and generally just better folks. Now, just back to that formula for a second, just to tidy that up before we go any further. I'm going to give you a little, as you know, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so let's just do this scientifically. Suffering equals pain times resistance. Let me give you some just arbitrary numbers to help you learn that formula, because that formula is one of the most important formulas for your whole life of being able to grow to your fullest potential and helping other people do the same. So this is important. So let's say we have a pain at an 8 level. Let's assume arbitrarily that nature gives us resistance to that pain, which it will for you today when we do this practice session. So you're going to have 8 times 8 is 64, so your suffering will be 64. Let's just say, as it is for a lot of life situations, that you can't change the pain level. It stays at 8. The betrayals, the waiting for the diagnosis, just all the things in life, the physical as well. But let's say through this training that you're doing with mindfulness, that you have learned how to, which you're going to learn today even more so, drop that resistance instead of nature's 8, but you can drop it down to 4. Now you're going to suffer at only 32 as compared to 64. And if you can drop that yet again down to, say, 2 resistance, pain still stays the same. You can't do anything about it. Done everything you can, but there it is, emotional, physical. You're now going to suffer close to 16. Now, don't hold me to the numbers, but the principle I've just given you is sound. You will see as you continue to do this that principle holds. And believe it or not, today, some of you will actually experience that formula when we have 8 times 0. Let's say in a situation you can get your resistance down to 0. What's 8 times 0? This is not a trick question.
0.
It is 0. It is 0. So some of you today, because we're going to ask you to sit in a relative uncomfortable position, and we're going to ask you to not make any voluntary muscle movements. Now, this is just where we start as an option to do this. Some of you will decide to move your body within 6 or 7 minutes, and then regroup and hold the posture again. But through this process, then some of you will decide that you've got sufficient equanimity that you can do the full 30 minutes is what we're going to sit here. But through that, most of you are going to have an itch, just a regular old itch on your forehead, your arm, your whatever. And you're going to have a chance to apply what I'm teaching you about the body sensation you're having. I'm going to show you how to take that and apply it to that itch. And you're going to learn that if you apply these 4 major tools we're going to give you here to that itch, the suffering will dissolve. You'll still have a minor body sensation, but the suffering will be dramatically removed to the point that it's just not hardly there. I remember the first time that, I certainly had itches early on in my training, which started with this over 40 years ago, but I remember one of my biggest experiences. My life was never the same after. I had gone to an intense retreat, and these were 7 and 10 day retreats where you do this work 18 hours a day. And I remember I was in a pretty challenging cross-legged position, and it had brought, within about 45 minutes, it starts to bring, even if you're in good shape, it can start to bring quite a bit of discomfort. So I started working with these different centers of discomfort and doing what I'm going to teach you to do. And at, say, 4 or 5 of these centers, I was all these balls in the air. And I was doing that for an hour and a half. And then all of a sudden, there was no discomfort whatsoever. Just a minor aware that my legs were crossed. But, oh my gosh, I said, what's just happened? Well, what happens is this. Nature has a finite amount of energy that it puts into resistance. And if you can be equanimous with it sufficiently, then you're not going to be taken into that 8 times 8. And you can, in fact, stick with it, and it will start to just dissolve. Now, you're going to have to try that to experience it, but today you'll experience that with an itch if you're prepared to go that route, okay? So back to where I was in opening the heart. Why is this important? Because what you're going to learn here is how to increase your comfort zone in life. And this is how we practice equanimity every day in our lives, how we practice this dropping resistance. Remember, this word equanimity just means this subjective allowing. Out here, we passionately are working to change reality that must and should be changed. You know that equanimity allowing is not about just turning the other cheek and things like that. You know it's not that from my teachings that you heard. But when we do this work, you'll find yourself being in situations in life with a difficult person or with a stressful situation or having to do extra for something or other. And nature often wants comfort. It wants to keep this body comfortable. So you get resistances coming in. What's your steps? Your first step will be to mindful. Peter's aware that there's resistance setting in because he doesn't want to do this. And you'll start to see body sensations in certain ways. There'll be tightening here. You'll see feelings coming up of resentment or unfairness or out of control, all that. And then you'll also see the yada talk going on. And why does this always happen to me? Oh, is that right? All of this be fit we talk about, it starts to come there. And we're going to teach you today how to not be pulled into that theater, that sideshow there. And when you can just bring your awareness to the moment and apply the skills that we've been teaching you, you're going to be in good shape. Now, by the way, out of interest here, you might be understanding what we're going to do in terms of helping you to learn to do this. You're going to learn to reduce the resistance, as we said. So I got a nice little prop here. My granddaughter made me this 2-inch braided rope, okay? So I asked the groups, and don't have to get into answering yourself, but think about an answer as I ask this question. How can I break this 2-inch braided rope without any tools of any kind? Needless to say, I can't pull it apart or whatever. Well, the answer is to just take it apart, thread by thread. So we divide it into 4 strands, no surprise there, body sensations, feelings, and the 2 ways we think, image and talk. And then we take each of these, which, by the way, are braided with these 3 strands now. And you likely know about braiding, you can't braid 2 strands. So these 3 strands, we've got one that's a active form. Let's take body sensation. You've got some active forms of body sensations and more passive forms, but they're in that braid. But you've also got a black strand in each of these 4 major threads. That's resistance. If you can drop the resistance out of that system, then you can't braid those sub-threads, and therefore you're not going to have those sub-threads braided into the 2-inch rope. Now, it's just a metaphor, but it is one of the best metaphors that I've come up with. And the summary on that metaphor is you're going to learn how to divide and conquer, okay? You divide something into its component parts, and then it's manageable. You got a 100-pound weight. Well, you want to lift it. Well, if you put it into 20-pound sections, then you can do that. Now, very interesting here. When you take pain medication, the heavies, the Percocets, the Percs, the Oxycontins, wherever you want to go, even Tylenol 3s and whatnot. What is not known about those medications by a lot of people is that, although if I were to ask you, so how do they work? You basically say, well, I don't know. I guess the nerves are deadened somehow, and I don't get the same experience of pain. Well, there's some of that happening. But the main way that they work? Divide and conquer. That's why pain medication is still an illicit street drug. It's not because they just need their nerve drugs. Many people that buy street drugs, these painkillers, they don't even have physical pain. They've got emotional pain. And what these medications do is they significantly drop your ability to concentrate and focus. So you got a problem. But now if you can't concentrate on it, and the brain would usually be going without the drugs, yada, this is awful, oh my gosh, whatever, when's it going to end, right? Well, when you're on a heavy pain medication, who cares? You're not focusing on anything. You're just, that's divided this experience up into many different parts. So there's nothing too strong for you. So what you're going to learn today is be, if you will, like a natural painkiller. So just a little bit more on what we're going to do and to understand this thing of equanimity just a little bit better. All of our sense doors, body sensations, feelings, and image and talk, when we are with those and we're not conscious, as we've been teaching through the course, you've done your mindfulness work, you're now doing your formal practice, you're aware when you're having a certain body sensation, you're aware when you're having a feeling, and you're aware when you're having these image and talk thoughts, and you just watch them with this passionate, just watch them and fuse them with that allowingness, let it be, surrender at the subjective level, and they just do not, kind of take off into their own area. That mind that has a mind of its own no longer has a mind of its own because, we're bringing this an equanimity or allowing this to it. So when we're doing that, we are practicing not just to be able to sit in mindfulness or even do with the pain clinic. Like I say, it goes to your whole life. So we're teaching you the skills of how to be less resistant, and we're going to go into just how this happens in a second, and then we're going to start our engines here. But as we teach that, know that you are learning how to be a more open, equanimous, forgiving person. Once again, not to set yourself up to be taken advantage of, but to be able to bring kind of your, what I call your unconditional compassion to the moment, okay? And so that's what's at stake here. And we're not just teaching you how to work with physical pain, although it's going to help you throughout your life with physical pain. But you're also learning how to grow a deeper part of yourself, which really is not discussed nearly enough, okay? So just let me end with one more piece on this. It's the big picture of where we're going, and then I'm going to show you specifically what you're going to do. This is important. Just listen to this. I like to talk about compassion once again in my textbook. I'm going to read just a quote here. I say there's two kinds of compassion. This ties directly into what you're going to be doing today. Just follow the linkage here. Ordinary compassion gives rise to very close feelings, but it is most often essentially attachment. As long as the other person appears to be as worthy, appreciative, or good, compassion remains. As soon as he or she, however, appears to you as less worthy, non-appreciative, or less good, ordinary compassion changes. Instead of compassion, one often now feels something neutral or even negative. That is the good intentions of many, many people who are supporting and serving other people, doing their absolute best. Cognitively, I should do better. Cognitively, I want to do better, and that's okay. But as you can see where I'm going, there's a little bit of a holding there, that there's a condition. That's compassionate one, okay? The natural compassion, if you will. But there's another level of compassion that we can grow to, which is what we've been teaching you through the course, with genuine compassion, or what I like to call authentic compassion, manifested through conscious connecting, that term that I like to use. Another person's values or behavior has no effect on one's attitude, intentions, or our behavior. It doesn't impact us at all. How so? Authentic compassion comes from mindfully experiencing the other's suffering. We mindfully experiencing it. We get it. We get it at a very profound, deep level because of our consciousness. We now become aware and we want to do something for them, regardless of their acknowledgement or perceived worthiness. And that takes the growing that we've been doing with you. We've talked about, emotional self-regulation. We've talked about you learning to be more present in these moments. This is what comes out of it, and this is why we bring these really, really important teachings to the course, okay? So, in a moment, we're going to have you, you've all brought your stone. We ask you to bring a stone that's a little bit smaller than a golf ball. And
we have extras.
Do we have extras if you need some? Okay, that's good. So what we're going to ask you to do in a minute, I'm going to show you where to go, is we're going to sit on that. And I'd like to just give this couple of minutes on the stone, why it's such a great teacher here, okay? Not just because it's going to give you discomfort you can work with and learn how to do these skills, but so if I were to ask you, if you had one of your stones there and ask you, describe the stone for me. And some of you would hold it up and say, well, it's roundish and it's hard and it's kind of smooth, maybe a few cracks in it, but that's about my stone. Then I'd say, describe it for me if you had a 10-power microscope. Remember in your high school chemistry classes, you'd crank it up to 10 power. And what do you see then? Well, you see it's full of cracks and crevices. I mean, it's just the Grand Canyon right in front of you. That's a 10-power microscope. Then if I add you take that up to a 100-power microscope and prepare it so you could look at it, you'd be looking at the granular structure. At one time, that stone at room temperature it's now solid, but there was a time when it was liquid. It was molten because of extreme temperatures. But now it's solid, and it freezes into, just like water freezes into shards of ice at freezing temperatures, the stone is frozen. And then number 4, if I won't slow you down with this, but if you looked at this under an electron microscope with a little bit of appreciation for quantum physics, you would describe that stone to me as being 99.9999% space, not solid at all. And you'd also realize that it's moving, ever expanding and contracting, as all of nature is. So that's what you're going to be sitting on. But in order to take the teaching to a deeper level, I ask you, what's the right description of that stone? Which one of those 4 is right? And most of you are likely saying right now, well, Peter, they're all right. Absolutely right. So it's our decision in life to take that teaching, and what do we do with it? Hey, we don't do any mindfulness work. We don't do any of the other skills we've been teaching in the course. And you've got a pretty good life. You're doing, getting, having, bigger, better, more, and you're pretty happy. You got your health, you got friends, you got love. I mean, this is all good. But eventually, that starts to fall apart. So what we're saying here is, don't rely on just that one level of the stone. Our potential is to be all 4 levels. We can learn how to go, do the best we can in our life. Number 2, we can learn how to reach out to other people and be the best caring supporters, supervisors, adult, child, life partner, got a friend, whoever. We can be that way as well. And then those other 3 and 4, you can learn to do what you're doing now, which is opening consciousness. And as you open consciousness, you go to this 3rd and 4th level of that stone. You can have it all, is what we're saying. I give you that little 2 minutes to try to once again, I've never even apologized. I certainly haven't tried to hide the fact that every time I'm on the mic here, I'm trying to motivate you to grow out of doing, getting, having, bigger, better, more into your deeper potential. So that's what we're doing here, okay? So how are we going to do this? In a moment, I'm going to ask you just to put that stone on either side. If you realize when you're sitting, you actually have two that are called sits bones. If you just, either side of your butt, you're going to feel there's like a bone there. And I would encourage you to put that stone close to, and maybe in some cases even under it. So you're literally sitting on one side with this stone there, okay? And then as we get into our practice, we're going to do the regular practice for 10 minutes or so. And then I'm going to take you into how to live and work with the discomfort that's arising. Here's what it will look like. You got the pain and it's there from the discomfort, but you've got nature now bringing you into the resistance. How do we divide and conquer resistance? I'm going to have you look in terms of experiencing the body sensations. I want you to find the location that this discomfort is occupying. Because it's not throughout your whole body, it has a location. Number 2, I want you to get a handle on what the shape is. Because it's not over your whole body, there's a shape. It's got a perimeter. And we're going to bring that into you observing it. In each of these observations, you're going to learn how to be equanimous, allowing, surrendering in terms of your subjective experience. Next, you're going to look at this discomfort that's happening, and you're going to realize, oh, this discomfort, this intensity of this discomfort is not just one blah. If I look closely, it's getting stronger, and then it'll be the same, and then it'll go back down to being a bit weaker, and then up to stronger. And so I'm going to have you track the intensity of stronger, weaker, or the same. I'm going to have you track the size and the shape as being bigger, smaller, or the same. And as you're doing this, you are learning how to apply your mind into dividing and conquering what nature's trying to do, which is just coagulate everything and bring that resistance up to an 8 level, okay? Now this is next minute, all I'm going to give you is a minute here, and for some of you, this won't turn you on or float your boat, but some of you will be interested to hear this. When you do what you're doing, let's say you're not doing any of this strategy I'm giving you. So your nature is going to take all of your, remember we told you each second we've got 60 bits of data processing capacity per second. That's what MIT tells us we've got right now at the conscious level. So if we just stick with the surface level of the stone, nature is going to take that 60 bits and turn most of that into resistance. Okay? And then you're going to have your suffering. And this is what happens to you every day when you get into a suffering situation. What you're going to learn today, though, is you're going to look at that shape. Is it getting stronger, weaker, bigger, smaller? And as you do that, you're going to redeploy some of the energy that nature would have used to build your resistance. You're going to redeploy some of that energy into tracking bigger, smaller, same, stronger, weaker, same. And because you now are taking away from nature's real estate to build discomfort on, you're going to feel less and less suffering. Because the energy needed by nature to make your body and mind resist, it doesn't have the raw material. Because your consciousness has redeployed it into the experience of the present moment. This is why throughout all our training, through the training we've been saying to you, learn to stay in the present moment. Learn to not let that mind have a mind of its own and do what nature wants to do. Learn how to, with allowangness and equanimity, just redeploy. So you're not resisting anything. The culture would have you say, you get into discomfort, be it a relationship meltdown or be it whatever, turn 180, way back and run away as hard as you can, going to the mall and buy something new, plan your next trip, have an affair, whatever nature's decide you're going to distract you away from your difficulties. But we're going to say, go 180 back into it and see what is happening to develop the resistance and then learn how to divide and conquer it, okay? So that's what is going to be about the next little bit. We're going to ask you once again to do this for half an hour, but some of you will say, okay, I'm going to hold my posture, and maybe in 5 or 6, 7 minutes, you're going to say, okay, I think I've had enough of that. I'm going to move. I'm going to stay mindful. I'm going to stay with it for half an hour, but I'm going to adjust my posture, and then you'll go back at it for another 10 or 15 or whatever. And some of you will be okay with doing the equanimity to be able to do this. Here is the one big instruction. This is the only really big important instruction. Do not find yourself white-knuckling yourself through this experience, because that is not purifying consciousness. It is, in fact, contaminating consciousness. If you get into white-knuckling, geez, when is this going to be over? I'm not going to break. No. You've already lost. The moment your practice starts to fall apart, and I'm going to guide you really closely on this, you just stick with me and follow my instructions, and you're going to be able to do this experience. And from this experience, you're going to learn how to take it into other parts of your life or whatever. Today, we're just working, by the way, with physical discomfort. You're going to be able to do this same thing when you have an emotional or relationship discomfort the same way, because the same applies. You bring presence and equanimity to nature trying to cause you to suffer through the resistance, and you will not be driven by that resistance. Hence, you will have the presence and the capacity to deal properly with what needs to be dealt with, okay?